I'm Mike, the co-founder of Haystack. Welcome to episode 4 of the Haystack Tech Uncovered podcast, where I'll be chatting with tech leaders, disruptors, academics, and innovators about all things technology and software development. Today, I'm speaking with Dylan McKee. Dylan is the co-founder and CEO of Nebula Labs, a software house operating in the heart of the Northeast tech scene. Dylan is considered one of the region's leading names in mobile app and software development. He's a young entrepreneur and was noted by Apple at just 17 years old for his work developing My Altitude, a mobile app that tells users their height above sea level, which was downloaded by over 1 million users worldwide. This was a really interesting conversation, and it was great to dive into the nitty-gritty of how Dylan got his start as a tech entrepreneur at such a young age. I hope you enjoy the episode. Well, welcome to the podcast, Dylan.
Thanks, Mike. Pretty honoured to be invited.
Good stuff. I thought we'd basically just kind of dive into the first question, really. I did a little bit of digging on your background. I kind of wanted to speak a bit about your first experience as a mobile app developer.
Of course.
I heard it through the grapevine that when you were around about 13-year-old, that you actually released an app. I heard it went a little bit viral, something like over 1 million downloads. And I thought, could you maybe chat a little bit about that and how you sort of built the skill set from such a young age, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's pretty much the story, if you like. It's it's really embarrassing to look back on sometimes, but it's also quite cool. I was just kind of a lone self-taught kind of teenage programmer, and I'd been kind of building websites as you kind of do, tinkering around with HTML and stuff. And then I got an iPhone when I was 13, the 3G, like the plasticky one. It was cutting edge at the time, and looking back, it's just ancient. But it was really fun, and I was really into kind of Apple stuff as well at the time. And I thought, what, I'd love to make an app. They might be the next big thing. Who knows? Maybe I was onto something there. But it seemed like a really fun thing to do, and gruelingly and excruciatingly kind of taught myself the process, which was totally different to web development, and particularly the kind of tooling you had to build apps back in 2009 was really primitive compared to what you have now. So I think it took me like months to put that first app together. Whilst also kind of learning like the language, which was Objective-C at the time, which was a really kind of cumbersome technical language. It had stuff like manual memory management in, which I didn't really know how it fully worked at the time. I just sort of hacked it until it did. And loads and loads of kind of early Stack Overflow was kind of around, but not to the level it is now. So trying to use that, and then use loads of forums to get help and kind of get tips and stuff. So it was a really arduous process compared to putting an app together now, but also really fun. And it was quite almost the level of faff and effort, because it was just a hobby, made it quite fun to do almost. And proper learning curve, proper really interesting, and loads of stuff to go and investigate from reading stuff in one place to another, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
So really easy to get a real kind of tutorial hole, if you like, of doing one, then another, and finally getting the skills together to release something. And at the time, the App Store wasn't particularly big. So when I released an app which basically told you how high above sea level you were, your altitude based on your iPhone's GPS, it became far more popular than I ever anticipated. I thought, a few hundred people might download it. And within a few weeks of it launching, I was getting reports back from Apple saying you've had 150,000 downloads in Italy alone this week and stuff like that. So
I would imagine the altitude in the Italian Alps is far more interesting than knowing your altitude in Newcastle town centre or something. Yeah,
definitely. I was doing it in my bedroom just outside of Whitley Bay, and that was obviously a really flat, boring place to be checking your altitude at. So there wasn't much to see there, but it really skyrocketed in kind of the alpine areas, particularly as people started, I guess, going on holiday and stuff over that summer.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't believe the stats. When I first kind of saw them, I was like, no, this can't be right. There's got to be a mistake. And then started reading the number, and I was like, I know I'm young, but I can read a number that big, and that's a big number, sort of thing. Yeah.
So how old were you at the time?
13. So wow. 13 when I first released it, and then kind of all the way through my teenage years, kept on doing similar kinds of things to different levels of kind of professionalism. So kept on cracking on with kind of just apps that I had little ideas for, that people suggest to me as kind of like tongue in cheek, oh, it might be a good idea if kind of thing.
Yeah. So did you actually build in any kind of, I guess, viral mechanisms into the app itself to kind of get that level of traction, or was it basically just all word of mouth / I guess App Store optimization?
Yeah, absolutely no kind of viral links or sharing or social aspect to it at all, to be honest. I might have tweeted it because I've had Twitter forever. So I might have kind of tweeted when I released it. But apart from that, like very little in the way of like getting people who downloaded it to share it or pass it on. So totally against the grain of how you actually get users on an app, which is really weird. And App Store optimization wise, I remember kind of it was before the App Store had official keywords. So you'd read reports saying like, oh, put keywords in your like description. So I think I did that, and that was about the level of like optimization that I got to. And it was really like weird kind of primitive time to be building and getting stuff out there. And there just wasn't a lot of the kind of tools that are out there now. And initially it was totally free. I quickly kind of put some ads in to try and make a bit of pocket money. And I remember kind of adopting the Apple iAd network when that was launched in 2010, but that was literally launched after I launched my app, like almost a year after. So it was quite a late adopter to that actually, but yeah.
So did it have much staying power then in that case? If obviously I assume it was kind of one of those where you throw out version 1, you put up a few ads and then kind of let it do its thing. Did it stick around on the App Store? Can you actually still get it?
Yeah, you can technically still download it, and it's nowhere near the popularity it used to be. I think it's sometimes occasionally a top 100 somewhere now and then. So looking back at kind of the downfall of it would be quite interesting actually. But I guess it just stopped being that innovative of an idea. The novelty factor kind of wore off, and there were far better apps out there as the App Store really took ground. But I guess in terms of kind of the customer base and the fan base, there were some users who would, particularly in the earlier days, always get in touch and ask for like extra little feature requests and stuff. Cool. As well as kind of loads of emails with really annoyed users being like, it doesn't turn around to you properly. And I'm like, I'm literally 13 in my bedroom doing it. Go away. And from that, there was kind of a bit of a fan base around it, I guess. And I put like a paid tier level in where you could pay like 99p or something to get rid of the ads, and a lot of people actually did. People who I guess were using it, like ski instructors and that kind of thing, who were using it I guess really regularly, which was quite cool. But
so you kind of build up this cohort of I guess super users.
Which is odd for such a simple kind of utility app. And then I kind of started to learn that analytics were a thing and decided to put some in, and that was quite interesting just to get a breakdown of kind of where it was being used again. Stuff like that.
So it's interesting just to kind of hear I guess the backstory behind that, because there's always this, I guess it's a bit of a rhetoric where you kind of hear of these young sort of rock star developers, always self-taught, always kind of bedroom developers, and everybody just thinks, I guess they naturally have this knowledge. So I'm always quite interested to find out, how did you actually bridge the gap into coding? Because from I guess from an outsider, it seems so difficult to go from knowing no code to actually building and deploying an app to the App Store, for example. Was there any kind of resources or, I guess, things that you look at from back in the day that you would also rely on now, or you would suggest people who were coming in from kind of a non-technical background to look at if they were moving into coding?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I think particularly the iOS developer community was really good at from the start, and possibly a bit ahead of its time in, is that even in like 2009, there were still tutorial videos on YouTube. And I know it took quite a while for like other communities to get so kind of actively in that, but there've always been kind of, to varying levels of kind of quality and in-depthness, loads of YouTube tutorials on particularly like mobile app dev. So I think that's a really good way, and it's just dead accessible to kind of get in and start playing with stuff. And they'll normally link to like an example project at the end, so you can download it and almost hack apart what's been built in the video as well, which I quite enjoyed doing.
Yeah. I mean, I always I remember when I was first kind of getting into it, it was always, I always recommend this guy, Wes Boss. I don't know if you've heard of him before.
I've heard he's really good. Yeah.
If you're interested in getting into JavaScript and React and those kind of things, it's almost like he'll build a really good full stack app, and you kind of follow along, and you just kind of see it go from sort of this ideation phase to a design phase all the way through to build and deploy, really, which I always thought was quite cool.
I find that kind of like life cycle of development quite interesting as well, to see not only how people like actually do the implementation, but like how they approach that like design phase, like you say, and like that deployment phase. And just like, it's really interesting to see kind of what scale people are building things to as well. Because you get sort of totally starter guides where it's like so hello worldy that it almost doesn't feel worth doing it. But then you get the other extreme, you get a guide where they're almost like building like a serverless framework solution for the most trivial app, and it feels like total kind of over engineering at the other end of the spectrum. So it's really interesting to see like kind of how people approach things, and like
definitely
there's no right way and wrong way, but it's definitely interesting to kind of see that and then take away your own opinions and think, I'm going to want to apply that to my next project, maybe not that kind of thing.
It's interesting. That's a good point that you bring up. I find a lot of people are, especially developers, some are kind of really suited to, I guess, the kind of heavy engineering side of development, kind of building enterprise level software that have massive capabilities to scale, whereas some people are kind of in the I guess the sort of hacker mentality. Let's put something together and get it out there and see if it flies. Do you think you sit kind of somewhere on the spectrum of that one?
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely towards the more kind of hacker mentality. Yeah, absolutely. And then my co-founder Nick, who started Nebula with, is kind of at the other end of the spectrum in terms of kind of the operations and the deployment and the scalability side.
It's always nice to have that kind of complementary skill set, I think.
Yeah, I think it's so helpful for kind of any project or any business, definitely, yeah.
So I think, I guess fast forward a few years, this is another bit of when I was doing my kind of background research, I saw that you were actually invited to Apple's developer conference. Did you ever actually end up going? Because I saw you did a crowdfunding event to basically pull together the funds to get over.
Yeah, so I've been kind of 3 times. So the first 2 times were both kind of when I was in school or uni, and I'd done the kind of the scholarship thing where they basically give you the ticket to the conference for free, and you have to kind of pay to get there and stay there, which absolutely amazing experiences. And the first time I did it, particularly, I was in sixth form at school. And I was like 17, and managed to kind of, you have to put an app together, or you had to, I don't know if the brief is quite the same now, but you had to kind of put an app together like about yourself basically, which I hated doing, because I don't like talking about myself that much. I'm on a podcast, but I found it really embarrassing. I kind of did it and thought, well, I'll send it off and see what they say, and it'll probably be a no, but it's something to do. And came back with a yes, and I couldn't quite believe it, and absolutely amazing experience.
Amazing, yeah. I mean, it's always been kind of a bit of an aspiration of mine to get over there. Obviously, can't really now. It sounds like there's some bit of building work going on in the background over in your way.
Yeah. I'm in the office, so unfortunately, there's a bit of building work next to us at the minute. I hope it's not too loud.
No, it's fine. No worries. So it might seem like a bit of a kind of a naive sort of open-ended question, but in your view, what is the kind of secret sauce to building an app that users love and genuinely want to organically share? So if I was to come to you and say, Dylan/Nebula, I have an idea XYZ, how would you go about kind of breaking it down and figuring out what these mechanisms are to get something out there and get into people's hands, really?
So that's a really good question. I think it's almost like building the base level of features that people actually really want, but then almost like putting in some kind of passion feature, if you like. So some kind of like feature that you think this is a little bit unnecessary strictly for the MVP, but it's just that almost like that final 10% that will just make the app really fun or really addictive to use.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you get kind of involved in the design phase as well as just the kind of the coding side of things?
Yeah, massively. So we do some design and kind of UX and wireframing in-house, and then we also work with like a team of partners to do kind of the more like high fidelity designs, which works really well. And I like being involved, particularly in those kind of meetings between like us, the client, or the partner, and then any kind of design partner that we're bringing in as well.
Yeah.
And they're always really interesting in terms of kind of looking at things and thinking, that looks lovely and will be a dream to implement. That looks lovely and will be really hard to implement. Or that looks awful and will be impossible to implement. We can't have it, kind of thing. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah,
I think it's interesting. It's like kind of people looking in from the outside, I guess. There's always I wish I thought of that, or I have an idea for an app. And it kind of seems so simple. You have this sort of multi-million-pound idea, and then that's it. This kind of, off you go. What advice would you give to people who think it's basically as easy as just having an idea, and then you ship it and off you go kind of thing?
Yeah, I think my advice there would be almost like put your money where your mouth is, but also don't spend any money at the same time.
Yeah.
So like building like the best thing that you possibly can without investing a huge amount of money in a team or kind of paying for some time for a team to do it for you almost. So like what can you do with the likes of like no code or very low code solutions, or if you've got some coding skills yourself, what can you do kind of with your skills without needing maybe a back end to it, or like a large kind of comprehensive back end to it at least. Like just like using Firebase or something. Like what's like the most basic solution you can do to actually get it into some test users' hands before you kind of go down that route of putting a team together, getting investment, or kind of coming to a company like us to say like build it properly, basically.
Yeah, so I think no code's an interesting point. Actually, it's obviously kind of a bit of a buzzword at the minute. At what point do you actually think it becomes less about trying to build a no code solution and more about actually, right, now we need to scale it out. Now we need to get to the nitty gritty and start writing some code?
Yeah, no, really good question. I think like as soon as I think you've got like some interest on that no code solution, so whether that be whether that just be a few people kind of signing up to it and using your most basic feature, whatever that is, and you maybe manually helping them behind the scenes actually do the kind of the algorithm or the thing that will become the algorithm. I think as soon as you've got like a handful of people using it kind of either regularly or passionately or off their own back without you having to kind of force them into using it regularly, that kind of shows that you've got real kind of ground, if you like. And that it's definitely something that's like worth looking at taking properly into a development phase.
Yeah, I've always found it interesting because it's very easy to kind of fall into the trap of building the kind of grandest vision for your idea, when really it's kind of reel it back. Let's see if we can prove this idea first, and then we'll start to look to scale it out. So kind of build a bit of a community around the idea, and then you kind of you can sort of start to feel the, I guess, organic pull from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100% that, and I think like you're totally right in terms of like building a community around it and kind of. Even if you don't have a technical solution for 6 months, because that's how long the initial development is going to take, for example, if you manage to kind of build a low-code solution and get them passionately using it and get them engaged in that community mindset where they're helping to form kind of the design phase of the proper solution, if you like, I think that's a really cool way to go about it. And then you've got like kind of guaranteed invested users for when your solution does come about. You've got their help in shaping it and kind of testing it out. And you've got something for them to use for now as a kind of a stopgap.
Yeah, makes sense. So I kind of wanted to dive into a little bit about I guess university life, because obviously we were in the same year, went to the same university, but you had a bit of a different background to me. I.e., you basically knew how to code before you ever stepped foot into a university building. I was kind of wondering, why did you basically feel the need to pursue higher education when you already had clearly a pretty comprehensive background in building applications?
Yeah, no, really good question. I think for a couple of reasons. I think like firstly, like the university kind of the formal experience of like seeing how like people who do this academically kind of do it, and like getting to grips with kind of that more like theoretical side of programming and like learning like the proper ways, if you like, to do things, not just kind of the ways that kind of brutally work or kind of the hackiest solution to kind of fix the problem. I think that was really interesting. And, I had to almost unlearn a lot of habits because I came in with a lot of bias from the ways that I would do stuff before it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like it was a worthwhile, I guess, few years? Because there's a lot of developers who don't necessarily come from the university background and who are basically, I guess, your kind of standard bedroom hobbyists. But actually, when they land in a dev team, they're just as good as anybody else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. No, I totally agree. I think if anything, it's like almost like a personal preference rather than anything else. I don't think it should be a requirement for pretty much any tech job really at all. I think it was worthwhile for me, but I think in a lot of cases it is probably not necessary and certainly not a requirement because, like you say, if you've got that portfolio of projects and you've got that self-taught skill, and also not just a self-taught skill, but also the ability to teach yourself more pretty rapidly. Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think if you've got that and you can kind of prove that through a series of little projects or something like that, then I don't see why you wouldn't be as attractive to an organization that you're looking to work with. Like,
yeah, definitely. I completely agree. I think Yeah, I think going into university with the naivety of thinking I want to learn a certain technology, for example, that's not what you're going to get from it. I've came away with university with kind of a plethora of languages that I've just never used since, but it kind of gives you that fundamental knowledge, I guess, for what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, totally that. And it gives you like a lot of knowledge, almost a lot of kind of respect for how much hard work and heavy lifting the languages that you're using are doing for you. Because, you know, the amount of lines of code you have to write in JavaScript to accomplish the same as in raw C or assembly is totally different, like kettle of fish. And like having seen that, at least you think, oh, actually, this language is really good, despite how annoyed I might be at it today or kind of frustrated I might be today, kind of thing.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a bit of perspective as how far things have came, really.
Yeah, exactly that.
So after uni, I saw you landed a placement year at a Y Combinator backed startup. If I did my research correct, anyway, i.e. Moulton.
Yeah, it was just a placement summer kind of thing, and I did a bit of casual work, like freelance beyond that. But yeah, basically worked as kind of their initial mobile development team, if you like, which was really interesting. So Moulton, they were acquired last year. They were previously based in Newcastle and Boston, and I basically they are like a mobile e-commerce API, and I helped kind of develop their initial kind of mobile offering, so their initial SDK, and then do some like blog posts and almost like developer relations material on kind of onboarding people to it. Yeah.
How did you sort of plant the seed for this sort of entrepreneurial route that you went down, which isn't the typical route from university, i.e. kind of land a role at the Big Four and work your way up the ladder? Was your time at Moulton, did that kind of have an impact on, I guess the idea to pursue an entrepreneurial career rather than the standard, I guess?
Yeah, I think massively so. I think I was really taken in by kind of what I saw there, and I found the founders who I worked really closely with, because they had a kind of a very small team when I joined and did some work with them. I found the founders really inspirational in their outlook. Adam, Jamie, and Chris, their kind of outlook and the way that they did things was really cool and kind of really different to what else I'd seen around the industry. And I found that kind of really like took my interest and made me think, there's maybe something here. Maybe I could run something, obviously nowhere near the size of kind of what they built, but run my own thing and kind of work on projects that I find interesting, at least, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So where did the idea for Nebula Labs actually come about? And I was wondering if you could kind of give us a bit of an overview about what Nebula Labs actually do.
Yeah, of course. So initially kind of who we are, what we do, we're a software house based in Newcastle, and we essentially specialize in mobile app development and web platform development and API development, which is kind of behind everything that we do, really. So like the infrastructure for running your app or your platform, and then also like the front end implementation. And we work on a really wide variety of projects, and we work on kind of a real mix of projects and kind of internal products as well. So kind of a mixture in terms of the sort of types of work, if you like, as well as kind of the clients and partners that we do work with are kind of really, really different in size. So all the way from kind of your 1 or 2 person startup teams, all the way up to the likes of like Nexus and Axon Nobel and some of the Northeast councils, that kind of thing. So really keeping the client type and project type and size really diverse. Which I think like makes the company really different to many of us. We don't have exactly like an ideal client in terms of you have to fit into these boxes. It's more about the project and about like kind of the client's attitude to the project and kind of how they want to work with us and how open they are to kind of change and being quite agile and being quite innovative on the project, I think. Yeah,
makes sense. So what actually prompted you to build Nebula Labs?
More or less, it was kind of, I'd been doing some freelance work and it kind of led on as a bit of continuation of that in some respects, but kind of formalized it. And then also I thought it was just a really good time in the Northeast, particularly kind of, we set it up in 2017, but we had the idea in 2016. And I think it just felt like a really kind of, the Northeast felt to be kind of going places in tech then, and it is now as well. But a lot of kind of things were kind of kicking off then and starting off then. There was the likes of Campus North and the Ignite Accelerator, that kind of thing. And it felt like a really buzzing kind of ecosystem to be starting a tech company in, which I think really like helped and kind of spurred on my choices. And then also kind of mentioned it to a friend who I've known since kind of school now for probably over 10 years, Nick. And he was at Northumbria Uni studying kind of more network focused computer science stuff, so computer network technology, that kind of things, and taking it to him and just saying, oh, that sounds really cool, do you fancy kind of being involved? And he was like, yeah, it sounds amazing. So that was kind of the initial inception, and then kind of spent some time during that kind of final year of uni trying to fleshing stuff out and fleshing out how that idea might look and work.
How do you actually break away from, I guess, another software house that is obviously a clear competitor? I would imagine the first couple of years are quite hard going. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I would imagine those first 2 years are hard going until you kind of build up this network around you, and people kind of, people know the name of Nebula Labs, and it kind of there's an association with Nebula Labs for building really high quality products. So how did you actually go about and start to build that brand reputation and the network around you, like I say?
Yeah, totally. No, really good question. Yeah, like you say, I think it was hard to get those first few projects on board, and I think just totally over servicing those and doing kind of a really good job, and getting a really good kind of initial kind of reputation from that really helped to get some really good initial portfolio pieces, and just to kind of also be working with quite interesting people and interesting clients, because then it's, people are more keen to hear about what you're working on if it's interesting, because it's quite kind of captures their attention to hear about, rather than kind of, I don't know, like an enterprise system for the government or something, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's an interesting point about projects and kind of enterprise systems. Feel free to not drop in any names, but what was the most interesting project that you've actually personally worked on?
Oh, really good question. So probably the most interesting, just because it was totally out there and really different to any other thing that we've done, and probably anything that we'll ever do in the future, was we did a project with the Great Exhibition of the North back in 2018. To install 18 steam whistles around the city, and build the firing system for them. So we used like Raspberry Pis, kitted out with custom hardware that we designed, like custom circuits that we designed to kind of actually do the firing of these like steam whistles. And then helped with the installation, and then also built like obviously the software to do the firing. They had to go off at 1 p.m. every day in like a sequence. We had to do a lot of work on like clock synchronization then, which weirdly took me back to sort of university days, which I thought it would, and lots of kind of like distributed systems tech to make sure that they all go off kind of at the same time and at the same 1 o'clock in the right sequence. And then also like developing kind of like the stuff to actually go on the Pis was really cool. But then we also developed like a web service. So we had like an API to kind of log in and check the status and remotely set that off as well. Nice. Building that, deploying that, and securing it was really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's a quirky project, that one.
Yeah, it raised some real curveballs and is, like I say, unlike anything else that I've really ever done.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So again, just to touch on the point from moving from uni into this entrepreneurial route, what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to move into, I guess, either being an entrepreneur or being self-employed? Maybe they're just graduating from university, or maybe they're actually looking to, I guess, move out of a full-time permanent position in a company.
I think the first thing I'd always say would be to like actually just do something, because there's so many people who have like ideas for businesses, and they might be amazing ideas, but they just never really get anywhere. So I think like having the drive to do something, and like it's scary, yes, it's risky, but it's kind of it's the first necessary step, if you know what I mean. So like the drive to actually do something and build something and get something out there, whether that be like brand or a website even, or the first version of your product, like getting something out there initially feels really scary, because you're suddenly kind of introducing your idea baby, if you like, to the world. And you're going to get people who love it, you get people who don't like it as much, but getting something out there I think is really important.
Yeah, 100%. I think putting yourself out there, sharing your idea with friends, family, colleagues, but also your target audience as well, and just being kind of, I guess, open to sometimes brutally honest feedback.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think like, particularly if you think, this is going to be a full-time gig after uni or after what I'm doing now, you've got to be open to that honest feedback, because if you're not, then it's never going to get to the scale where you can rely on it as your kind of full-time gig. So yeah, totally.
Yeah, 100%. I think if leaving an idea to just kind of fester in your mind, fester in your head, I guess, I think it's super detrimental. You just kind of sit on it thinking it's brilliant for 2 years and never do anything with it.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think like we were saying before, like even with like no code solutions out there, even if you build something that is 10% of how good your final thing's going to be, at least if you've got it out there and you've at least tried it.
Yeah. So in terms of, I guess, colleagues and co-founders, actually, in my mind, one of the most important parts of building the business is finding a set of colleagues and co-founders that have a complementary set of skills.
Yeah.
So how did you actually meet Nick, your current co-founder, and how did you build a team around yourselves with a skill set that complement one another?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good kind of question. I think it is, sometimes $1 million question, the really hard question. And I think like in terms of meeting Nick, I knew him from school, and we were always kind of doing little projects or talking about doing little projects, and always just really interested in kind of the latest tech. And we'd always meet up and talk about it, and we were just really, really kind of interested in it. So I think that like the sheer kind of like crossover in kind of like curiosity and interest in kind of the space that the company was going into made that like an obvious kind of fit there. And I think also having known him for a lot of years, kind of know like how he likes to communicate, how he gets on with people, and kind of that level of kind of trust as well, I think is there, and that's really important.
Definitely. Yeah, I completely agree. I think if you can trust the people you work with, that's kind of half the battle. Yeah,
100%. And I think in terms of like bringing on a team around us, I think we did it fairly slowly, to be honest, in terms of we made our first hire quite quickly when the company was probably a couple of months old, but then sort of stayed at that size of 3 people for pretty much a year.
Yeah.
Just because it was a nice size to kind of do those projects that would build the reputation without kind of scaling up the company too quickly, which in kind of a more project-based company, rather than kind of a VC-backed or anything kind of company, I think was really important and allowed us to kind of grow at a reasonable pace. And then kind of taking on people after that, it's always been about kind of culture fit and interest over kind of sheer technical ability or sheer kind of portfolio. Obviously, you've got to have the skills, but you've got to kind of be a nice person and be a person who wants to work with us, but we want to work with as well. And like also have that sort of culture of like trying new things out, being quite interested in the field, and kind of always wanting to do the next kind of cool thing within the industry.
Yeah, 100%. I think the if you nurture a culture of, and it's kind of a cliche, but the willingness to sort of break things, kind of willing to tinker with things and try out, I guess, things that aren't necessarily the standard way of doing stuff.
Yeah, totally that. And I think going back to like the question about like, do you need to have went to university? Like, even if you have or haven't, it's that kind of thing of, if you went to university, but have you came out with the ability to solve problems beyond university ones? Like, have you got the ability to kind of search for the right things and look for kind of solutions to problems that you've never even heard of before, and kind of like learn a new framework that way, that kind of thing. Yeah,
definitely. I think it probably brings us onto a nice segue, actually, just on the topic of new technologies. Is there a particular space in tech that excites you kind of going forward? It could be a specific sector, a movement, I guess a new innovation, or even just like a new discovery in academics. Yeah,
so I think really interested in the real-time web and kind of, we've got WebSockets at the moment, but kind of where that's going with like modern versions of HTTP as well, and how they're kind of almost blending together. And I think that'll open up a totally different way of like interacting with apps and with the web when you're kind of effectively always connected.
Yeah.
You're not really kind of logging in and logging out. There's not really the concept of loading times, etc. It's just always there, and it's always pushed to you, or you're always pushing to it. I guess once that's possible to do in like a low power way, where you can have an app just sitting in the background, but also kind of always connected, that'll be really interesting, and that'll unleash a lot in terms of kind of how clever apps can be, if you like. Because at the moment, obviously, you can make an app fairly context aware, but you're still limited by someone having to go into the app a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So once you have that kind of extra level of kind of real timeness to the stuff that you're using, I think kind of the fluidity of the experiences and the speed at which things will be able to like suggest context aware things, or even just do actions because they know kind of where you are, or that you've just done something. I think that could open up a lot of doors, and I find that really interesting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I'm really interested in where you think, just kind of again off the back of that, where do you think we go from here in terms of mobile development? Frameworks like React Native and Flutter are kind of sweeping through, and I wonder again, I hesitate to say always, but will there always be a place for kind of hardcore native mobile development?
Yeah, no, really good question. So we've got quite a bit of experience in kind of both types, if you like, and in terms of kind of the hybrid model, we've always been a little bit let down by a lot of cross-platform frameworks. But to be fair, these are a lot of kind of legacy ones, which are now getting replaced by things like Flutter. And we've been mainly let down by kind of the longevity of the code, like the fact that it just kind of doesn't last and build as well as native code, say 6 months on even from developing it.
Yeah.
Which I think stuff like Flutter is really starting to do away with. So I think Flutter's kind of the first one that's made me want to almost look at them again and think that looks actually really kind of comprehensive, and really like something that you could build kind of a maintainable app in. And in terms of, I think, native development, I think there'll always be a place, just because you're always going to have apps that need features that aren't really accessible via hybrid development or aren't to the level that you need them to be.
I agree. I think Flutter's been one of those where I've seen some apps built in Flutter, and some of them are insanely good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the fact that like Google are using it like internally a lot is going to help, because I feel like every other kind of project like that, even React Native to some extent, never really had the backing of a big company. I know React Native had Facebook, but never quite the buy-in that like Google's going to be able to give Flutter.
Yeah, completely agree. A bit of a U-turn here, but okay, it wouldn't be a podcast episode without talking about COVID. Everybody's kind of had to make this big shift to working from home / working remotely, and it's kind of been propelled into the limelight. How do you see this affecting the big technology epicenters, Newcastle included in that? Do you think people are going to start moving into the cities again? Do you think people are going to continue working from home? Where do you see Nebula Labs positioned in amongst all of this?
In terms of kind of how I see it affecting the wider world, I think kind of larger cities are going to be less populous because there's less reason to have to live in somewhere where it's, incredibly expensive or really congested, like your Londons, your San Franciscos, that kind of thing. I feel like cities like that will definitely become less necessary to be in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I think cities like Newcastle could do really well out of it in terms of we're quite a small city and we've got loads of lovely countryside and beach and stuff nearby. So even if you live kind of a metro journey outside of Newcastle and you come into an office in Newcastle for, say, 2 or 3 days a week and then do the rest of the time at home, you've got quite a nice balance there. And you can have quite a nice balance there without kind of going too much out your way to have to do a commute a couple of times a week or to have to kind of look for something that's totally remote. But I think the tech giants are going to have to go a lot more remote, like Microsoft and Google kind of are. And I think a lot more will have to follow suit there. And I think kind of smaller companies like Nebula and kind of others, I know we're looking at more kind of hybrid, flexible working. So we're not getting rid of the office because we all enjoy it and we all quite like seeing each other. And there's not that many of us in here. We're keen to keep it, but also I think we did do kind of work from home before. But I think it'll become kind of more of a commonplace thing in kind of everyone's weeks, rather than just kind of doing it on days when you almost did it for another reason. Obviously, there were some people who just fancied it some days, cool. But I think often it was kind of, I'm waiting in for someone, so I'm just going to work from home, rather than like it being like a solid kind of, work from home a day a week or 2 days a week regularly kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the rhetoric that you see on social media and things, it's always kind of one way or the other. Everything's going to be remote, or everybody's going to be back in the office. Yeah,
I think for 90% of companies, unless you're a government or a Google, I think a lot of the time it's going to be like a split between the two, because I think people generally quite enjoy the office and who they work with, particularly if they work at a smaller company, because they've probably chosen to kind of work there over going for a corporate. So I think like the stuff that people are losing out on there by not being in the office. But at the same time, I think a lot of people have been kind of opened up a bit more by work from home. So I think I totally agree. I think like a solution in between works really nicely for most people.
Yeah, I agree. Just on the back of, I guess, chatting about the Northeast and Newcastle, why did you actually opt in, out of interest, why did you actually opt into building a company here in the Northeast over somewhere like London, or even obviously clearly have the capacity to move to somewhere like Silicon Valley if you really wanted to? Why did you, I guess, stay close to your roots? And obviously, this is a question coming from me, and I'm clearly quite biased towards Newcastle. But I was just more interested as to why you stuck around, really.
Well, I really like the city, to be honest, in terms of I just find it a nice place to be. It's got everything that I kind of want in a city, and it's close enough normally in kind of normal times to get to London pretty regularly and pretty quickly, and to get to, Manchester, Glasgow, that kind of place pretty quickly and pretty efficiently. But in terms of kind of being a place to live, I just find it really good in terms of has pretty much everything I want, has quite a nice culture scene, has quite a nice tech scene. And on the tech scene front, particularly when we were setting up Nebula, there was a real hive of activity, which I hope is going to return kind of after COVID. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, and obviously want to help out where I can in kind of improving the tech scene. It was a real kind of hive, particularly in those kind of 2016, 2017 years, and really hope that buzz kind of comes back, because I think it has the potential to be a really leading kind of tech city.
Yeah, I completely agree. And obviously we're pretty biased being from here, but I guess the business network in Newcastle, it's so friendly and everybody's just willing to kind of knuckle in and help one another.
Yeah, and everyone sort of knows each other a bit more as well, which I think is quite nice.
Yeah, definitely. I really do. I completely agree. I hope organisations like Ignite, Campus North, maybe there's a spin out of something similar to those, but I think they just nurture so much good quality kind of grassroots software businesses, and the whole mentality in the Northeast is very much kind of get stuck in and help one another. And it's something that I haven't seen in other cities necessarily, especially London, I think, just because it's so huge. I think there probably is little pockets of this kind of environment in London, but overall it's a bit of a behemoth, obviously. Yeah,
absolutely. I think within London you almost have many communities, whereas here it's a lot more kind of open and together as one, and a lot more kind of happy to help each other out kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. You've acted as kind of an interim CTO at a number of places by the looks of things. And you clearly have obviously a number of years building and scaling Nebula Labs and kind of balancing a lot of moving parts. Do you have any advice for anybody who's looking at moving into engineering management, or any tips and tricks to kind of improve efficiency for engineering managers?
Yeah, really good question. I think talk to your team lots. So I think just kind of get their opinions on stuff as well, and have kind of culture where they can tell you if they think you're wrong, which I think it's a very commonplace thing in startups, but a bit less so in corporates, or much less so in corporates. But I think getting into that culture where everyone has a voice and everyone's heard equally, and you as an engineering manager or someone in that kind of role has no more kind of say really over an engineer, kind of keep everyone at the table and at the same level of input, I would say. I think that's really important. And I think that's the way that you definitely get the best work and the happiest work from people.
Yeah. So how do you manage, I guess, communication flow? Because I've been a dev, but I've also been a kind of external stakeholder in a different team. And a lot of the times the perception of dev teams is that it's kind of this black box. They're in their own kind of segmented, they're in their own little area. They're away writing the code, and it's there's a few wizards working away in the corner. But I think there has to be this kind of nurture and communication flow, essentially. What kind of processes do you put in place at Nebula that encourages that, to make sure that stakeholders are always kind of in the know?
Yeah, so we try and do loads and loads of kind of, I would say, asynchronous planning. So kind of trying to put stuff into packages like your Trellos and your Jiras, depending on what's appropriate for the product or the project, and trying to kind of get that knowledge in there so that you don't have to kind of always be calling each other, because I think that can get, particularly during the work from home kind of time, that can get really draining if you're always having to have kind of internal calls to get stuff done. So we really try to do that, and then it allows people to work a lot more flexibly as well, because if the stuff's there, they can just get on with it when they fancy, rather than having to kind of have a massive kind of session about every single item. So really big on that, and really big on kind of keeping everything kind of as flexible as possible, and kind of scoping stuff out in that way where people can just pick it up and kind of take their bit away on it almost.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, good stuff. I think that's
cool.
We're pretty much at the end there. Thank you very much for jumping on the call with me, Dylan. I really appreciate it. It was really good to get an insight into kind of, I guess, behind the scenes on Nebula Labs, but also how you kind of made the leap into being a developer and how you kind of built out this, this career from yourself, but moving from the standard university background, obviously, all the way into the entrepreneurial route, which you clearly thrived in. So hopefully other people find it interesting to hear about your story and things.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for having me, Mike. It's been a real pleasure.
Good stuff. Thanks very much to Dylan from Nebula Labs. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Keep a lookout for the next edition to the Haystack Tech Uncovered podcast, which should be released very soon.